So good morning. Feel like we're having a little family reunion. I haven't been here in a while, and I've missed you, and I see faces I haven't seen in some time, and it brings me a lot of joy. And I noticed that our friends from Dharma to Canada are here, so yay, welcome, happy to have you. You know, this talk, I think because I haven't given a talk in months now, I have a lot of things that have been bubbling up that I want to say. So I tried notes to kind of organize my thinking. I don't know, we'll see if I reference them. I'm going to try because I really want to get a few things across. But I think the inspiration for this talk for me, like the kind of where I'm coming from, is I think it's very easy right now in this world to lose heart. And I find myself in that place too, you know? And the Dharma is like my only medicine. It's the only thing that's helping me to navigate. It's like the phrase that comes through is, big love needs to meet big crazy. Big chaos, you know? Like, yeah, we always say we have to be big enough to hold the whole thing. Oh. The only option is to be the sky, you know? And let the weather move through. But wow, that's hard to do. Sometimes. Unless you actually just go out and lay in the grass and look at the sky. It actually helps. Go to a mountaintop, go into the woods, but my God, are the ticks bad right now, so maybe don't do that. You know, the starting point for the Dharma, the Buddha's like first teaching was the truth of what, you know, is called dukkha, or dissatisfaction or suffering. And I think back to my days when I used to like earn a living. It's been a long time. But I did consulting work, and you always start with, well, a situation analysis. What's our situation? And that's kind of what the Buddha did. He was like, come on, we have to look, we have to see. And I remember in the early days of teaching the Dharma, or even just being a Dharma student, you know, and being in dialogue with my Sangha friends, and there were people that were like, I don't like this. They're telling me I'm suffering. Don't tell me I'm suffering. I'm not suffering. I have a great life. And I would go, good. I'm not going to try to talk you into that you're suffering, you know, like, but you don't, Corinne just invited me into her class at Nazareth. Those students don't need to be convinced of the truth of suffering or dukkha. Not right now, not in this world. But the Buddha taught, you know, this concept, many of you have heard it in the sutras, of the second arrow. And what is the second arrow? It's where like the real churning of suffering lives. It's where we're in resistance to what's occurred, to the experience, that sensation that I was trying to point us to notice in the body and in the mind. We're in resistance because And the resistance causes us to add. And the more we add to the experience, we give it all of our stories and our interpretations and our beliefs, the more there is to resist, actually. Yesterday I was at a hospital in Warsaw where my father-in-law is. And he was taken there maybe less than a week ago by ambulance. And he's been in and out of the hospital. He has congestive heart failure now. And this has been going on for a while. And he's had a long life. He's had a good life, I think he would say. But his heart is failing. And he's actually in the final stages of his heart failing. And we had to make the decision with him yesterday. He's still pretty with it, that it's not safe for you to go back home, and you need to be someplace where they can monitor all your levels and give you the medication that's keeping the fluid, at bay in your lungs, and the oxygen to help you breathe, and the reality is when he went by ambulance, he was dying because he didn't want to go to the hospital. And the doctor did a beautiful job of walking him through and walking the family through the situation. We can send you home. It will be a revolving door. You'll keep coming back. We can take better care of you here. So we made the collective decision that palliative care was the best option, and to move him to the nursing home that's attached to the hospital. And we had to walk through all of his goals of care and care directives, And the doctor shared that you get to a place where there's oxygen starvation, and you can give morphine as a medication that will actually help diminish that struggle when you can't get air, when you can't breathe. And the doctor cited a study. He said there are people, they've done research, when they get to stage 4 with lung cancer where they really can't breathe, they use morphine, not enough to necessarily expedite death, which is what we tend to associate it with, but just to alleviate that hunger for oxygen, that struggle. And he said it's the fighting against the disease, it's fighting against the condition. The Buddha would say fighting against what is. They actually live longer with stage 4 lung cancer by alleviating the fight with the medication. So this is the second arrow, It's like there is the suffering of, I can't breathe, and then there's all the things it means and the terror that it introduces in the mind, which is understandable because the impulse to survive is so strong. But we're complicated, human beings. We've interpreted so much as a threat, and our impulse to survive is so strong. And it takes us over into that place of papancha, that mental proliferation. And we tend to kind of go in one of two directions with the not wanting life to be as it is. We tend to either try to take control, there can be a hypervigilance, there can be, I'm going to solve the problem, I'm going to conquer, or there's a bye-bye. Like, Calgon, take me away. Do you remember that commercial? Some of us are old enough to remember it years ago. It's like that really luxurious bath where you just check out. And I remember the first time I heard the translation for the mantra that we chanted, the Gate Gate Paragate mantra from the Heart Sutra. And you step into this Buddhist container, and there's all these weird words, other languages, and you don't know what they mean. And I didn't know what I was chanting, And one of my Dharma brothers said, he just shared the translation in passing, and it was gone, gone, gone beyond. And my mind just opened, just like that, to that place where there's no being caught up. But it's not the Calgon path. It's not the checked out. It's that bigger field. It's that innate capacity we all have. So my talk today is to talk about how we access that in this tradition and what's been really helpful to me. So I do want to talk about sacred world. I want to talk about sacred narratives and sacred vision. But I want to begin with really bringing something into presence, which is our collective situation. And it's a beautiful poem that was written that I saw on John Kabat-Zinn's Substack, I think. And it's a poem that one of his friends wrote. And it really opened my heart. So I want to share it. And at the end, it's a little bit long, but it's beautiful, I think. And it's hard to hear, but I think it's very clear. And it points to, it calls to something for all of us. So this woman, Jane Gumpel, sorry, not a B, a P. She wrote, "Beloved people of Iran, it is a curious thing, this feeling of distance, as though I am here and you are there, as though what touches your sky does not ripple through mine. And yet, this is precisely the illusion. We have drawn lines on maps, called them nations, called them borders, and forgotten that the wind does not read them, the sky does not obey them, that the human heart was never meant to be divided this way. So when harm comes to you, something in me knows it. Even as I sit here in safety and comfort, in a life that has not been shattered by what you are enduring. And I feel that too, the unbearable truth of my own privilege, that I can witness and still sleep, that I can grieve and still be held by a world that has not broken open beneath my feet. And so I speak not from above, not from afar, but within the same field of being. I am sorry, so deeply sorry. Sorry for the noise of power mistaken for wisdom. Sorry for the threats spoken as though life were a game of position and control. Sorry for the forgetting, this deep, persistent forgetting, that you and I are not separate events, but movements of the same whole. Because you are not an abstraction. You are the voice that gave us Rumi, who laughed at the idea that love could be contained. You are the echo of Hafiz, who spoke to the soul as though it were always already free. You are the remembering of Sadi, who knew that humanity is one body, and that when one part suffers, the whole must feel it. And you are the long, steady breath of Ferdowsi, who carried a civilization in words so that it could not be erased. That is what you are, not what is happening to you. And yet, what is happening matters. Because suffering is real, fear is real, loss is real. The trembling of a life under threat is not illusion. So what can I offer you from here, from this broken heart? from a place of safety I did not earn. Not solutions, not answers, only this, that I will hold this in a sacred place of awareness, that I will not turn away to protect my own comfort, that I will let this touch me, unsettle me, stay with me, because ideas do not stop bombs. Philosophy does not shield a child, and the illusion of unity, while true in essence, does not protect a body in danger. So what remains is not comfort, but responsibility. To not look away, to not excuse, to not let this become another story I move past. Because if we continue to live as though we are separate, then this suffering, this destruction, this repeating of history is not accidental. It is the natural consequence of that belief. And so the question is no longer philosophical. It is immediate. Will I continue to live inside the illusion, or will I allow myself to be changed by what I see now? With love, Jane. And I think she ends with a really important question for us. And it is, will we allow ourselves to be changed? And there's so much momentum that gets created around the pain of what we're witnessing. And that momentum has to do with a lot of the conventional narratives that we're all sort of sharing in our bubbles, our self-reflecting bubbles of right and wrong and good and bad. And it's not to say, it's not to deny the harm, it's not to move into a refuge of comfort, but it's to allow ourselves to be changed, to say, I can't live in that conventional narrative. I can't feed that mental proliferation anymore. I can't solve this problem with this mind that created it collectively. That's proliferating with the help of all kinds of media. And the media gets rewarded by jacking up our nervous systems, It's the whole business model, right? So we have to, if we're really going to be the bodhisattvas, the beings who are here, right, to awaken through the path of serving the world, our service to the world has to be to step out of this narrative of division, that we are clinging so tightly to, which stems from this idea that we're separate. And it's so deeply conditioned for so long. It's so much what our default network in the brain is just doing all the time. This self-referencing narrative, me, I, mine. We got a mantra. We're using it. We're using it all the time. It's that that hum that's like there, that low level hum that's causing that discomfort, that sensation I was trying to point to. And so what's really helped me is to turn toward the sacred narratives in our tradition. And I remember Jane Ellen Bleak years ago saying, you know what I love about the Dharma, and these aren't her exact words, but she said it's such an empowering point of view, like a viewpoint or a frame or a system. Because instead of like the idea of original sin, right, we talk about original wisdom, that we are already Buddhas. We are already awake, we just forgot. So we have to kind of reawaken. And it's not just I'm a Buddha, it's you're Buddhas. This is a Buddha field. This is a realm that is sacred. But we've lost the thread, and we've lost the thread because what is our conditioning? What is the collective conditioning? And we just keep going back through it. And if some of us don't choose to interrupt that, to say enough. Like I was raised Catholic, this is where you're on your knees. In the Buddhist tradition, this is where you're doing a full body prostration and just surrendering. There's a prayer that I think came out in the Hopi tradition, and I think it was like 2011, or where they talked about this time in the world, and it was something like that we've told our people this time would come, and they're saying, but this time is now. And this is the time when the water is moving so fast. And what we're trying to do is hang on to the shore. But the practice is to let go into the water. It's not to fight against what's happening. And that doesn't mean that we aren't to step in, to take action, to interrupt harm, to address injustice, to use our voices, to use our bodies, to use it. Whatever tools we have. But it's not to be limited by the contraction of division and separateness, by the conventional narratives that are holding us hostage, that prevent us from being able to see the Buddha in the one who's misbehaving. I remember the Dalai Lama calling the people who flew the planes into the towers the mischievous ones. And that was such a gentle, kind, generous way of addressing what many of us were addressing differently. And we know what the conventional narrative was, and it took us to war. So our job in our tradition is to interrupt this. So I think we need inspiration, I think we need connection and community and practices that help us hold this sacred vision that we are Buddhas, that sees our incredible potential and the potential in all beings, the potential of humanity. That doesn't lose sight of that when we see the confused behavior, when we see the reactivity, when we see the aggression. And our tradition actually says, so there's the sutra tradition where we when rises up, we try to abandon that place in the mind. We apply an antidote. We bring in the loving kindness. We try to calm it down, That's the sutra tradition. Really effective. It's a complete path to awakening. But in our tradition, we say, welcome, come on in. Let's get to know each other. Let me use this energy. Let me recognize that this sensation That's, rising, right? Whatever it is. Could be grief, could be frustration, could be full-on rage, could be indignation. And the list goes on. We can use the energy of that to open up to something much bigger. We don't have to live in that bubble of reactivity where we're projecting that discomfort out and we're perpetuating it and we're sharing it with others. Instead, we can actually say, oh, hello, Mara, as the Buddha said, hello, you little devil, you adorable little devil. You uncomfortable sensation I want to get rid of. I want to label. I want to make a thing so that I can remove. You are actually like my Buddha nature pinging me to remember. You're pinging me because you're reminding me that there's a gap that I know at a deep level something's not right. Something fishy is going on. I'm so frustrated by the fact that I feel incomplete. I feel inadequate. I feel like the world is wrong. I need to fight against this. I need to fix this. I need to solve this. Because you know there's another entire dimension to your being. There's some place that you can trust, that you have access to, that you know intuitively, that you've had direct experience with. And you're here because of that. And you practice because of that. I found myself in my parting words to Corinne's class. She asked me for some. Oh, okay. I said to the students, trust. We'd been talking about Buddha nature and confused nature. And really the confusion is just the Buddha nature. Confused, And it's trying to help you remember. That's a sacred view. I said, that's what you can trust. Don't lose that thread. Come back to that thread. Welcome in that confusion, actually. I didn't say this to the students, but this is the hardcore part of our practice. We welcome it in. We use it as the fuel for awakening. All experience in our tradition, in the Vajrayana, becomes the path. And in the Vajrayana, we hold a sacred vision that we are all Buddhas. And we have the Dzogchen and Mahamudra meditative traditions that point out that nature very directly. And then once we're introduced to that, which we've already met, I promise you've met it. Once we've been introduced and we recognize, then we start practicing to continue to kind of touch in and have those glimpses. And we begin to try to open those glimpses up. And all it is about turning around to that bigger field and realizing we're that awareness. We're that boundless, loving, open awareness that hasn't gotten caught up in this loveless contraction of separation, of labels, of stories, of beliefs, of identities, of limitation. The heart that's like, So in our tradition, we use Dzogchen and Mahamudra, that direct pointing out, and then we do these practices of sacred world, which I want to say a little bit about. We do those practices from within the view. We remind ourselves of this view of the nature. And then we practice. And this is where we have, in our tradition, in the Vajrayana, all these colorful Buddhas, and they have all different expressions and faces. Like the iconography is already hinting at or gesturing to say to us something about this path. And this path is all those faces you have when you sit on the cushion and they start coming and coming and coming, and they have thoughts and they have feelings and they have stories, and those 84,000, those are our path. That's our Buddha nature, frozen and contracted and put in a cage by the mind that creates. And all we have to do is see that and melt that and free that up. And in the Vajrayana, we use all those colorful Buddhas, and we actually generate. We have this part of the practice called the generation stage, where we utilize that energy of emotion, that energy in the subtle body, that sensation that we feel. We utilize that. And the other thing we utilize is this papancha, this propensity we have to constantly be creating our world with our thoughts. I mean, they know now, neuroscience knows, like, perception is what is creating reality. Like, we can see it. So we have habituated, that's our default mode network, running, right? That's how the mechanisms of the mind that work, especially without any training. So tantric practice, which is what I'm talking about now, sacred world practice, says, okay, let's harness that. Let's use that propensity we have to create. And let's stop with the daily sadhana, the daily practice of creating samsara, creating the world of suffering, creating the spinning and keeping going, this kind of automatic ignorance, this story of division, of separation. And let's instead let's use sacred narrative. Let's use the power of the mind that's doing this automatically, unconsciously most of the time. And let's use it consciously. And let's generate ourselves as our awakened state, as the wisdom being. Let's imagine ourselves as the Buddha. And the Buddha has all these, Buddha just means awakened one, right? And then people started Buddhism. But really, it's like the Dharma is just this truth, this way that's awake, being awake in the world. And all the traditions are pointing, all the religious traditions are pointing to it. So let's generate ourselves. Let's take the end result and let's generate ourselves as that now. And we do sadhanas where we do this. We're invited, and there's a whole little story about what we look like and the sacred instruments we're holding, and you see that these Buddhas, some of them have very peaceful, beautiful, loving faces, like Avalokiteshvara and Tara. They're bodhisattvas and Buddhas of compassion and love and wisdom. And then you see some with like weapons and flames and dark colors and like, that scares me, but we have that. We have that. And all of those faces are just different illustrations of all those states that we get into that have two sides, awareness and unawareness, as it's taught in the Dzogchen tradition. Or they have the side of confusion, ignorance, or they have the side of wisdom. So it's taught every one of those afflictive emotions that we get caught in, that obscures our Buddha nature, is actually got a wisdom quality that if we can liberate, if we can just turn around and see, we can unleash the energy instead of the energy of hatred and aggression. The mind can become incredibly clear. That's an example. They're there waiting to kind of be unleashed. So we do these sadhanas and we generate, first we bring the deity up. We imagine that this, we call it a yidam, the commitment being, the being that is here to help us, right? We imagine that deity, that yidam in front of us. We visualize them in a beautiful lotus seed, and and they're surrounded by a whole mandala of supporting a cast of characters that are all awake and here to help, And this is where we're creating a relationship, right? And now in ordinary consciousness, we're constantly creating relationship. We're constantly creating meaning and story. But this is a sacred one. This is one that kind of turns the mind. Instead of the sadhana of samsara, it's a sadhana of awakening. So we're building this relationship with this energy, this awakened energy. We're calling it in. We're getting to know it. We're receiving. We're making offerings. We're praising. We're saying thank you. We're offering prayers. And then we are arising as a mirror reflection of that same being. We are arising as our wisdom self in that form. And these forms are all visualized as luminous. They're not solid, because this is what we do. This is where we're stuck. We solidify everything, We limit everything to what we think about it. So this is where there's this luminous, empty quality, this vividness, this aliveness. This is form and emptiness. It appears, but it isn't limited to what we think about it. So we arise as this wisdom self and we conduct this whole ceremony. We have this whole visualization practice that we do. We're using the imagination. Instead of the way we're conventionally using the imagination, we're using this sort of sacred vision. And the idea is it's like a placeholder. It's like moving us closer to how things actually are. And it's also like creating a channel. It's creating an access point. We use symbols, we use images, we chant mantras, we say prayers, we visualize sacred syllables. And these are all ways of opening a kind of inner receptivity to our own Buddha nature, to the deity within, to the guru within, to the yidam within. This is how we connect energetically. And the funny thing is, it seems so foreign when you start with these practices. But they start to show you how you're actually creating the world all the time. And they start to orient you to something that has a depth and a resonance with what has always been there, that is not stained or obscured or confused by the mind that conceptualizes, the mind that proliferates, the mind that makes. And this is a vision where we use the whole body as the temple. Sometimes in these sadhanas we call the body like a sacred city. Like it's kind of like Horton Hears a Who, right? Where there's like a speck of dust, and every speck of dust has a being, and then there's a world within that, and a world that keeps opening up. It's kind of like that. It's like they describe like every pore in the body, has a deity in it. It's just this beautiful way to work with the imagination, to begin to see. So you go out in the world, you've been cultivating this Buddha field, this mandala, and this wisdom self, which, oh, by the way, at the end of the sadhana, you dissolve, it all goes. because we don't want to get attached. Attachment is fixation. It's where all the problems begin. We don't want to make that real, but that's a semblance of something that's closer to the reality of who we are and what this all is. And then you go out in the world and you start to watch the mind and you realize, I always referenced that years ago when there was that what would Jesus do like phenomena that was going around. People had like things they wore, like, I don't know, bracelets or something. And it was like WWJD, what would Jesus do, you know? And it was to remind them, you know? So it's kind of like that. You realize like, oh yeah, Tara wouldn't just be yelling at the Wegmans auto checkout for telling me something's in the bag. That's my joke. Like, that's where I really lose my you-know-what, is somehow at I can be nicer to people, but when the technology doesn't work, I get really mad. So anyway, you start to notice, and then you look at you start to see your confusion is really just the other side of your original face, your Buddha nature. That when you can just melt with it a little bit, add space to it, turn around and look at it with this bigger awareness, which is really this open-hearted, expansive, boundless place of who we all are. It unwinds itself. And the more we create that receptivity to recognize these mechanics, this is what's going on, the more when we see other people enacting all their confusion, then we're not so inclined to react to it because we actually see their suffering very clearly. And this is how we become the sacred anchors for the world. You know, in Corinne's class, they played a little bit of a documentary from my teacher, my first teacher, Kochan Rinpoche, who spent 20 years in a Chinese labor camp. And he talks about it as retreat. And this is sacred vision. You know, and these students were so curious, like, how do we do that? Well, first we have to see that it's possible. Have someone hold up that mirror. You know, and this is what people like Kochan Rinpoche, Anam Thubten Rinpoche, they're just beaming at you and they're giggling at your confusion. And we are so funny because they're just seeing our Buddha nature. And they make it possible for us to contact it within ourselves. So when we do sacred world practice, when we're doing tantric practice, we're creating that receptivity to that nature that's already here. It's like I see the time release, or whatever, time-lapse videos, and I just can see this fern completely unfurling and opening up, you know. It's kind of like that. It's like we create a holding space with sacred world practice for our own nature to fill it up, for our wisdom self, for our big bodhisattva heart to just expand into it. But first we have to reserve the table for dinner. Or I was just trying to download things from, I've had computer technology, hell realm of late, another complete samsara onto its own. And I was on the phone for the 5th day in a row with a high level assigned to me personally tech support at Apple. And I finally went, oh my God, are you telling me that when I say download from iCloud, it's not downloading? That I have to then take a second step and put it on my, make a copy on my local drive, that the download isn't down? And she said, no, that's what's taking up all the space on your hard drive. I was like, so wait, when I hit download, it's reserving the space for the files, but then I have to tell the files to go fill it up? They were like, yeah. I was like, that's really confusing. But but that's kind of what we're doing with tantric practice, is we're making space, a holding container. We're creating a receptivity that we can step into. We're stepping out of, we're interrupting the sadhana of samsara, which has its own momentum, which we can devote a whole life to, staying lost in. So this is how we do what David Flanagan talked about years ago in his Bodhisattvas Everywhere talk. This is how we become the rising tide that lifts all the boats. This is what the Bodhisattvas do. They don't just default to the narrative of samsara, of pain, of the cycle of suffering. It's not that they're denying what's happening. No, they're able to hold their whole heart open. In fact, there's a state of mind that we talk about, of consciousness. In our tradition, it's called Rigpa in the Dzogchen tradition. And they've done research on the brains of these long time meditators, like, tens and tens of thousands of hours or something. And they've seen this state of Rigpa is a state that doesn't exist in any untrained brain, any brain of anybody who doesn't have a really sort of rigorous, dedicated, long-term meditation practice. But in that state, something really interesting is happening. If there's like a noise or something like unpleasant that arises, they see the same spike in the monk's brain that they would see activate in a recognition of what's there in an ordinary brain, an untrained brain. But then they also see simultaneously, happening at exactly the same time, a full, I forget how it was put, but like a full being with and processing exactly that experience without the thought or the label or the cognition. It's just the experience just happening and moving through. Incredible. This was a most incredible retreat. And I released a knot in my mind that I had become aware of, but that I couldn't get to meet this bigger field. I couldn't connect those dots. This was a place of contraction and confusion that just was so old and so ancient and so embedded from my childhood. No amount of therapy, with psychedelics, without psychedelics, nothing penetrated this. It was still there. But I had that experience they're talking about in these scans, where it simultaneously came in, the experience, but it was in this bigger space that Anam Thubten Rinpoche had made so accessible, so available in his teachings and in his pointing out, that it just moved through. It didn't have the horror of my labels, the haunting of my stories, the contraction and the fear. It was just experience moving through. And this is what these awakened ones are doing sort of all the time. This is why this is said to be the time for these teachings. So these teachings on these practices that were kept secret, it required all kinds of preliminary training to get them. The masters are opening them up now. Anam Thubten Rinpoche has me teaching tantric practice now, which I didn't do before and probably wouldn't be doing if he wasn't encouraging that. But this is what I need. I sometimes need the inspiration of these practices, this holding space. This is where we can put all that energy, and we can transform it. The Vajrayana is the path of transformation. It's not the path of getting rid of abandoning, of renouncing, or of antidoting. It's the path of transformation. And then it's the path of direct seeing the nature. That all the confusion is just our Buddha nature trying to get our attention. It's just our frozen Buddha nature. So just please remember that. And this is why we have Sangha, this is why we have community, because we need to hold this vision together and we need to do these practices together. We can't default to these conventional narratives. We have to hold this sacred view when we're misbehaving, when others are misbehaving. And we have to have a practice that we come back to find that sacred anchor within, to come together and to be that sacred anchor for each other. So I love you all. That's my talk for today. Let's not lose heart. Let's not lose heart. Let's get to be big enough to hold it all. But don't try to do it with your ordinary conventional mind. Reserve the space. Thank you.